My name is Emma, and the night my stepfather stabbed me with a fork, I learned that silence can be louder than any scream. It was Thanksgiving, the house swollen with the smell of butter and onions, the oven breathing like some prehistoric creature in the kitchen corner. I had been home from college for exactly 23 hours, which was enough time to realize that every photograph on the hallway wall had been rearranged. The pictures of me as a child, gap-toothed, triumphant after a spelling bee, were pushed up higher, out of eye level, like the family wanted to keep my memories, but only where they could pretend not to see them. The table was a battlefield dressed as a celebration. My mother had set it with the old cream china rimmed in gold. The plates, she always said, were for special occasions, as if there were a list somewhere of moments worthy of them, and our lives rarely qualified. She wore a soft gray sweater and a necklace I didn't recognize. She looked tired the way stone looks tired at the bottom of a river. Beside her, my stepfather, Wade, sawed at the turkey with the concentration of a surgeon and the tenderness of a man cutting rope to toss someone overboard. "You've put on weight," Wade said as he carved, not glancing up. "College food will do that." I pretended not to hear him and poured sparkling water, counting the bubbles like a child counts stars to make a wish come true. My mother lifted her wine and set it down again without sipping. The clink was a tiny bell no one would answer. My grandmother, my father's mother, arrived late as always, her coat a storm cloud of wool around her shoulders. She kissed my forehead and whispered, "You look like your dad when he'd refuse to laugh at a bad joke." It should have warmed me, but instead something inside me cracked into attention, because there were two kinds of compliments in our house. The kind you paid to buy peace, and the kind you said when you remembered the truth, we ate. We pretended the food was the point. Wade talked about his new contract at the dealership, how he'd negotiated like a bloodhound with a law degree, whatever that meant. My mother nodded the way a person nods when they're standing at the edge of a cliff and someone is showing them pictures of a beach. I told a story about a literature seminar. My professor, the one who thought Emily Dickinson was a comedian in disguise. And when I got to the part about the bee in the classroom and the whole room swatting at nothing, Wade laughed too loudly and then said, "Speaking of tuition, we need to talk about your spending." I felt that sentence like a hand closing around my throat. "My spending?" I asked. The fork on my plate had reflected a sliver of light that shot into my eye, and I blinked tears that weren't from emotion. Not yet. "You're reckless," Wade said. "Those books. New laptop. You think money grows on a family tree?" Grandma cleared her throat softly, the way she did when she was about to say something that mattered. But my mother spoke first. "Wade," she said, Tonight is exactly the night," Wade interrupted, gesturing with the carving fork, 3 tines gleaming. "We have an audience. Maybe the girl will listen." "I'm right here," I said calmly. "Because when you grow up in a house where rage walks around in socks, you learn to stay very, very still." He smiled at me, a cat with a bird feather stuck to its lip. "Your scholarship doesn't cover everything. We've been supplementing and we see the bank account." "That's my dad's account," I said before I could catch the words. "He set that up for me." Wade's smile sharpened. My mother's wine glass trembled, ringing a fine note. "Your father," Wade said, "has been dead for 15 years. Time to stop living on ghosts." "I'm not," I said. "I'm living on what he left me." I don't know why I said it then. Maybe because Thanksgiving tastes like history. Every bite seasoned by who we used to be. Wade set down the carving knife and picked up the fork like it was a weapon he'd earned. He leaned over the table. I saw a smear of cranberry on his cuff. What he left you, Emma, is a mess your mother and I have cleaned up. No, Grandma said quietly. That's not what he left. My mother's eyes clung to mine for a split second. Pleading? Warning? And I looked away because I suddenly felt both too young and too old. A child at the mercy of adults and a woman walking into a courtroom alone. Wade said, "Go get your statements." He pointed the fork at me as if it were a compass, and I was north. Let's all see what Princess Emma thinks is hers. The room tilted, not literally, but the air shifted like a long inhalation that never turned into an exhale. I don't need to prove myself, I said carefully. Not tonight. Then you admit you're stashing funds, Wade said. His voice had the bright edge that always meant a scene was coming. You admit you're taking advantage. Grandma placed her napkin on the table with reverence, as if it were a flag she was lowering. Enough, she said, but words are not breaks. Wade leaned farther. The table jiggled. Gravy sloshed. I flinched, and that was what did it. He brought the fork down, not with full force, not a murder, but a sudden thrust, a mean punctuation at the end of a sentence. The tines bit my forearm, shallow but shocking, the pain shooting white. I pulled back, chair scraping, and blood rose to the skin like an accusation. My mother gasped my name. Wade said, "Don't be dramatic." But his face changed the way a sky changes when a storm realizes it is more powerful than the land below. Grandma was on her feet. She moved faster than I'd ever seen her move, as if she'd kept a secret store of velocity for exactly this. She pushed Wade back with the heel of her hand. "You touch her again," she said in a voice I didn't know. "And I'll show you what the law still remembers about men like you." Silence fell so hard the chandelier hummed. A drop of gravy slid down the side of the boat and landed with a plop that, in an ordinary world, would have been funny. I pressed my napkin to the wound and held my breath until I realized I was doing it and forced myself to let air in again. That was how we ended Thanksgiving. Me in the passenger seat of Grandma's car with a dish towel wrapped around my arm because I refused the idea of my mother driving me. Grandma drove as if the road belonged to her by ancestral right, which in some ways it did. At the urgent care clinic, a nurse named Mia washed the wound and said meaningful things like, "This looks superficial," and "no tendons." And I nodded and watched my grandmother's hands in her lap. The way they stayed steady, folded like a letter no one had ever opened. Back in the car, Grandma didn't drive home. She parked at the overlook where the town's lights made a necklace of yellow beads below us. The night was so clear that the stars looked cheap, like costume jewelry someone had scattered across velvet. She turned to me. "I'm sorry," she said in a voice that belonged to both the woman who raised my father and the girl she'd once been. The one from black and white photographs who wore boxy coats and laughed like the wind had told her a secret. "It's not your fault," I said. "Because that's what you say to the person offering you the only shelter you've got." "It is. Because I let it go on this long," she said. "Because I believed that patience could fix a river when a dam was what was needed." She took a breath. "Your father left you more than that little account you think is yours?" I stared at her. My heart, which had been wrapped in gauze ever since the fork, kicked once against my ribs. "What do you mean?" "There's a trust," she said. "A substantial trust. Your grandfather and I added to it over the years for you. Your father set it up so that you wouldn't have to say yes to things you should say no to, just because you were cornered." The word trust did a strange thing to me. It opened a door into a memory I hadn't visited. Me at 7 on my father's shoulders, reaching for apples. "Am I supposed to know about this?" I asked. You were supposed to know at 21, Grandma said. But your mother, she paused. Wade convinced her that letting you access it would spoil you. He convinced her that he could manage it better. I heard the careful way she said manage. How long have you known? I suspected for years. Tonight confirmed it. Her eyes flicked to my bandaged arm and then back to my face, and I realized she wasn't just furious. She was grieving. Not for the wound which would fade, but for time. For all the years things had been wrong under a roof where we'd pretended they were right. How much? I asked, because if you're going to drag truth into a cold night, you might as well make it stand still. 217,000, she said. And change. I haven't seen the most recent statements. The number felt unreal, like a misplaced decimal in a physics problem. Why didn't anyone tell me? You were supposed to be told last year. She looked beyond me, out at the town. I handled the legal side after your father died. Your mother was always impressionable with men who sounded certain. Wade sounded certain. The air in the car was too full of history. I cracked the window and let November slip in, sharp and clean. What do we do? We go to church, she said. I blinked. Church? She smiled, but only with one corner of her mouth. Not to pray. To see Reverend Hale. He has a key to the filing cabinet in the basement where I keep copies of everything, documents your father entrusted to me when he got sick. He told me, Mom, if anything happens and I don't trust myself near the end to be smart, you be my brain. I was. I am. We drove there. The church was dark, except for the red light above the side door, which made the brick look as if it were still embarrassed by old sins. Reverend Hale met us in khakis and a sweater and said nothing about the hour, only hugged me carefully and shook Grandma's hand, as if her bones were the same material as the stone floor. In the basement, the metal filing cabinet stood where it always had, as if it had sprouted there. Grandma's hands finally shook as she fitted the key. Papers whispered as she opened the drawer. She pulled out a thick folder marked with my name in my father's handwriting. The letters were big and hopeful. Seeing them made my knees loosen, and I sat before I took the folder, because the weight of it was not only legal, it was my father's voice crossing the distance of a decade and a half. We read. We learned. The trust existed. It was irrevocable. My mother was a trustee with fiduciary duty to act in my best interest, and there were stipulations for distributions for education, housing, health, and support. Wade's name appeared nowhere. The last notarized amendment, signed just months before my father died, included a note that might as well have been a letter to my future. If anyone tries to tell you you're asking for too much, remember that you are asking for what I meant you to have. You are not a burden. You are my daughter. I pressed my fingers to my mouth. I did not cry. Sometimes the most private part of you refuses to perform on command. Instead, I felt a steadiness begin in me, the kind that starts at your ankles and moves up, bracing your knees, aligning your spine. Grandma closed the folder. We'll go to the bank tomorrow, she said. And on Sunday we'll have dinner. And I will speak. How? I asked. What will you say? She looked at me the way a general looks at a map. The truth. But truth needs timing. She glanced at the Reverend, who had withdrawn politely to the racks of choir robes under plastic shrouds. Sunday dinner, she repeated. People confess to their plates. It's a family sacrament, how we bless and betray one another with food. If they want a theater, we will give them an audience. That night, I slept in my grandmother's apartment over the bakery where she worked part-time, because she didn't like the way the retired version of herself watched television. She tucked me into the couch with blankets that smelled like cinnamon and rain. When the lights were out, I stared at the dark ceiling and pictured the fork again, the quick insult of it. My mother's face kept flickering into my mind, lit by the chandelier, the kind of light that makes people look both softer and more fragile than they are. Morning was luminous and ordinary. We ate toast with honey. Grandma made a list on a yellow pad. Bank, lawyer, copies. She handed me my father's folder and said, "Carry this." Her mouth was a firm line. "You're old enough to hold what's yours." At the bank, the manager's name tag said Claire, and she had the haircut of a woman who got things done without writing them down. When she saw the documents and the dates, her expression shifted from polite to careful. "Of course," she said. "Let me print the statements." We sat in a little glass-walled office where sun poured over the carpet like spilled milk. I felt strangely calm, as if my body had learned a new word in the night and was practicing saying it. When the statements came, they showed distributions. Tuition checks, yes, but other withdrawals labeled ambiguous things like household and investment, sums that added up like a slow leak in a boat. Grandma pursed her lips. "This is not what your father intended," Claire nodded. "If the trustee made distributions not in the beneficiary's best interest, that can be challenged." "But," she hesitated, "I shouldn't give legal advice." "You've given enough," Grandma said. She squeezed my hand once as if to say, "See? The world still runs on some rules." We took everything to a lawyer friend of Reverend Hale's, a woman named Aisha who had a laugh like a doorway swinging open. She read fast, humming as she skimmed. "You have a case," she said when she was done. "You have more than a case. You have leverage." "I don't want a war," I said softly. Isha looked at me as if I were a page she wanted to understand. "Sometimes you don't get to choose between war and peace," she said. "You choose between a fair fight and a quiet surrender." Grandma scheduled Sunday dinner with my mother over the phone that afternoon. Her voice was bright as tinfoil. "Yes, dear, of course we want to come," she said. "We have some family documents to discuss. Good to clear the air." I imagined Wade listening, smirking, unaware that the air he liked to pollute was finally about to be cleaned. I was not safe yet. Safety is not a door you open and step through in one motion, but I could feel the latch lifting. Saturday was a waiting room. We bought a new blouse for me, soft white, clean lines, because Grandma said, "Armor looks different on different women." I helped her bake a pecan pie. My hands remembered how to cut butter into flour, how to drizzle ice water and stop before the dough turned cruel. We moved around each other in the kitchen like dancers who'd agreed on the steps at last. That night, I sat with my phone in my lap and typed a message to my mother 3 separate times, deleting each version. "How are you? Are you safe? Do you know what he did? Do you know what you did not do?" I sent none of them. Instead, I opened the folder and reread my father's note. "You are not a burden." It felt like a command as much as comfort. A dare to live as if I believed him. Sunday slid into the house smelling like coffee and rain on pavement. I dressed slow. Wade texted the family group, "Remember dinner at 5, as if he were hosting a fundraiser for his own myth. I didn't reply. We drove across town at 4:50. The trees along our street had given up most of their leaves, and the branches looked like hands overstaying a question. Grandma parked in front of the house I'd half grown up in. The white paint needed a new coat. The blue shutters were an insistence that we were respectable. Through the window, I saw my mother moving quickly, setting out plates. Grandma touched my wrist before we went in. "If at any point you feel like the ground is tilting," she said, "look at me." I nodded. The front door opened before we knocked. Wade filled the frame like a poster for a mediocre movie about fathers. "If it isn't the prodigal princess," he said. But his joke was flat. He saw the file folder in my arms. He saw the set of my jaw. Something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, the oldest language he spoke. My mother appeared behind him. She reached for me, then restrained herself, hands catching air. "Emma," she said. "How's your arm?" "Fine," I said. The bandage was gone. A faint quartet of red crescents remained, an echo of teeth. We went in. The table was set again with the good china. There was pasta this time, not turkey, because Sunday dinners were supposed to be easy. Wade poured himself wine and didn't offer any to us. I sat. Grandma took the chair to my right. "Before we eat," Grandma said, "we have some things to discuss." Wade rolled his eyes. "If this is another lecture about respecting boundaries," Grandma opened the folder. She did it with the crisp drama of a woman turning to the final page of a mystery novel. Papers slid out, white and official. My father's name printed across them like a light I hadn't realized I still missed. My mother sat down slowly, as if her knees had become someone else's problem. She reached for the edge of the tablecloth and pinched it like fabric could save her. "This is about the trust," Grandma said, and put the documents between the salt and pepper shakers as if she were laying down cards. Wade laughed once, a bark that had no dog behind it. "Oh, that!" "Yes," Grandma said. "That," he shrugged. "What about it?" "We pay her tuition. You paid the mortgage," Grandma said. "You paid for your fishing trip in June. You paid for the new tires on your truck. You paid for a life that my son did not write you into," my mother whispered. "Wade." He ignored her. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, smile slow and spreading. "It's all for the household," he said. "Household includes Emma. Household includes everyone." Aisha's words, "fair fight or quiet surrender," rung in my ears like a tuning fork. I placed my father's note on top of the stack. I slid it toward my mother. She stared at it, then at me, then at Wade. Her face was a small continent, tectonic plates shifting under skin. "Read it," I said. She did. Her breath made a sound when she finished. Not a sob. Not yet. But something that admitted air had refused to carry her for a long time and now remembered how. Grandma glanced at me once, and I nodded. She turned back to Wade. "You will resign from any influence you exert," she said. "You will sign an agreement that you will not contact the bank on Emma's behalf. You will pay back what you took that was not for her." He snorted. "You think you can make me?" Grandma smiled the way snow smiles when it decides to become a blizzard. "Yes," she said, "but I'm giving you the chance to choose to be decent." My mother's hand moved. A small, brave thing. She placed her fingertips on the paper, on my father's name. "Wade," she said, her voice thin and very young, "did you use Emma's money for your trips?" "For our trips," he corrected, then saw that grammar was a foolish hill to die on and said nothing. Grandma slid another paper onto the pile. Aisha's letter drafted last night, citing statutes and duties, words that made even my breath sit up straighter. "You will sign," she said, "or we will see you in court. And everyone will know." The chandelier hummed again. The pasta cooled in its bowl, olive oil solidifying at the edges. My mother looked at me and then back at Wade as if the path out of a labyrinth were hidden in our faces. Wade's smile vanished. He stared at Grandma with a contempt that had always been part fear. Then he reached for his wine, knocked it back, and set the glass down hard enough to startle the salt shaker. He said nothing. I picked up a pen. It felt heavier than ink. I set it beside the letter. I didn't speak because sometimes victory is a quiet thing, the opposite of a shout, an opening, a clearing. Wade looked at the pen. He looked at my father's name. He looked at the 4 small punctures on my arm, bright as a constellation. He reached. Wade's hand hovered over the pen like it was a trap. His jaw worked, teeth grinding behind his lips. For a long moment, the only sound was the clock on the wall. Steady, merciless. Then, with a curse muttered low enough to be mistaken for breath, he snatched the pen and signed. Each stroke looked angry, jagged, but it was ink, and it was binding. Grandma folded the paper calmly, as though she had been expecting this exact moment all along. "It's done," she said, her voice firm but strangely tender. "Your father's wishes stand." My mother pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. Not from Wade's anger, not from fear, but from release. "Emma," she whispered, "I should have told you. I should have protected you." I looked at her, and though the ache in my chest was real, it was also tired. "You still can," I said. "But it starts now." Dinner cooled untouched. Wade poured himself another glass, but the room no longer belonged to him. He sat smaller, deflated, like a man discovering that the stage lights had gone out and the audience had left. That night, back in Grandma's apartment, I opened the folder again. My father's words, "You are not a burden. You are my daughter," glowed more brightly than ever. For years, Wade had tried to make me believe I was less, that I owed my existence like a debt. But now, with ink and law and the steady hand of my grandmother beside me, I finally knew the truth. The fork wound on my arm healed in weeks. The scars on my trust and family would take longer. But the inheritance Wade had hidden was more than money. It was proof that love, real love, leaves behind more than scars. And as for me, I wasn't a victim anymore. I was Emma, the girl my father had believed in, the woman Grandma had defended, and the one who would carry both their strength into every room I entered. The Sunday dinner destroyed them completely, but it built me. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take that away.